started.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the AIA California Council of Architectural Component Executives, How We House Redwood Empire Edition. We're so happy that you've joined us today. Next. So we housed Orange County last month. Today we're Redwood Empire. Next month, we're going to be focusing on Central Valley. And then the following month in November, How We House Long Beach. And I just wanted to put a shout out to all of the people that are fighting the fires currently. So a couple of housekeeping. Click on the Q&A button located on the black menu bar at the lower or upper portion of your screen, and you can type in any questions you might have. We're going to say there may be time at the end for a live Q&A because we have quite a presentation for you today. I'm just going to read out the learning objectives. Attendees will learn and examine the strategies in designing and implementing healthy, reasonable, and sustainable design in market-driven, attainable, affordable housing, and we will discuss the various funding sources and scaling options available in our region. Attendees will learn the health benefits of living in deliberately designed and built communities that foster physical, emotional, and social well-being. Attendees will learn how empowering cities with various types of high-density housing close to downtown urbanization benefits the community on a whole. Attendees will also learn about cost-effective, sustainable, innovative design solutions and potential new technologies that can help in designing and building more fire-resistant neighborhoods and communities. And attendees will earn one AIA LU and potentially a HSU unit for attending this presentation live. And the disclaimer is that we're waiting for HSW approval. So AIA California will submit credit within 10 days of the presentation as soon as we receive the approval. Thank you. And now to the state of the state.
Okay. I'm Amberly Leslie, a legislative advocate at Housing California. Housing California is a nonprofit advocacy organization that leverages our deep relationships with coalitions and practitioners across the state to shape the narrative on affordable housing and homelessness, build and shift power to elevate underrepresented communities, and drive transformative policy change that homes, health, and wealth and thriving. I'm really grateful to be able to welcome you to the American Institute of Architects How We House event. California has the highest poverty rate in the country when accounting for cost of living. While housing costs are significantly higher in coastal and urban areas, low and stagnating wages in rural inland areas also make it difficult for low-income households to make ends meet. There are 2 million very low and extremely low-income Californians who struggle to find housing that is affordable to them. In 2019, nearly 5 in 10 very low-income households and 8 in 10 extremely low-income households were severely cost-burdened, meaning they spend more than half of their incomes on housing costs. We are now witnessing the economic reverberations of these statistics, which have been heightened by the COVID-19 pandemic. Some of our neighbors who enjoyed modest incomes lost their jobs when their workplaces shuttered. Some have slipped into poverty and fear the threat of eviction, while others have fallen into homelessness. California's homeless population increased by nearly 7% early last year to over 160,000. Yet paradoxically, despite record low interest rates that would typically spur residential construction, developers across the country have faced increased costs associated with labor and material shortages. Never before has the scale of our housing affordability crisis been so great. If you are like me, you recognize that the scale of our housing crisis demands that we all pitch in towards solutions. In collaboration with the California Housing Partnership, Housing California has chartered a comprehensive set of policy solutions to end homelessness, meet our state's housing needs, and advance racial equity and economic inclusion in just 10 years. Our Roadmap Home 2030 offers strategies in key 5 areas. First, we need to invest in our values by providing ongoing financial resources to create affordable homes. Second, we need to promote fairness in our tax system, rectify structural discrimination, and generate the revenue needed to meet the scale of California's housing. Third, we must advocate for public policies that ensure renters have equitable access to housing and are protected from market speculation and systematic discrimination. Fourth, we support policies that create efficiencies and accountability in government. And finally, we need to reimagine growth so that developing affordable homes in all communities is easier and cheaper, especially in areas of opportunity and in places where Black, Latinx, Indigenous, and other people of color traditionally have been excluded. You can learn more about all our 57 policy solutions by visiting roadmaphome2030.org. We are grateful to our statewide partners who advocated with us to secure support from the California legislature and Governor Gavin Newsom for unprecedented levels of housing investment. $2 billion will be allocated over the next 2 fiscal years to help local jurisdictions address homelessness. $2.75 billion over the next 2 years have been allocated to augment Home Key, which builds on the success of Project Home Key by providing funding to localities to serve those experiencing homelessness by acquiring and rehabilitating hotels, motels, and vacant apartments. $500 million will go towards California's low-income housing tax credit program. In coming years, we will continue to utilize our Roadmap Home 2030 to advocate that LIHTC expansion be made permanent, as it is a critical and reliable source of funding for affordable housing. Additional state resources have also been allocated to improve homebuyer assistance programs, to preserve naturally occurring affordable housing, and prevent eviction and foreclosure. In all, nearly $12 billion have been allocated to end and prevent homelessness and spur affordable housing development in our state. As an industry, these historic affordable housing investments buoy our spirits. Yet we know that durable change takes time. And so that means we must continue our advocacy in partnership for solutions like the ones I just mentioned. We look to you to join our efforts as creative visionaries, as masters of the long game, as jacks of all trades to help us move California towards a vision of housing that is sensitive to a community's history, its culture, its landscape, toward a vision of housing that is as affordable as it is beautiful. I hope you enjoy the program. Hi.
Well, welcome to How We House Redwood Empire. My name is Danny Strenning. I'm a local practicing architect, and essentially I'm serving as a moderator for today's talk, and I'm going to provide a little background context to our chapter. Next slide, please. So the Redwood Empire Chapter is somewhat unique. It's actually 8 counties that cover over 26,000 square miles of area. Within that 26,000 square miles, the population is about 870,000 people. And then further drilling down, over 50% of that population lives in Sonoma County, which is the southernmost county in our chapter. A majority of the architects in our chapter practice and work in Sonoma and probably Mendocino counties. The largest city in those 8 counties in Sonoma County is Santa Rosa, and it's about 180,000 people. The issues that face Sonoma, no, that's perfect. You can go ahead and change the slide. The issues that Sonoma County is dealing with are sort of chapter wide. This slide is up for essentially 2 reasons. One is the stats on the left essentially illustrate the problem that we're having up and down the state, right? Which is we have an affordability and an availability problem with housing, which has essentially been exacerbated recently by the fires in 2017. By way of an example, the city of Santa Rosa lost 5% of its housing stock in that Tubbs fire. So we're already behind the 8 ball with an affordability and availability problem, and now we're sort of working to even just get back to level. And then the other reason for this slide is that picture of the county itself, right? It's a very special place, and the shared kind of reverence for the natural landscape and the agricultural landscape is something that makes the place special, but also needs to be thought about in terms of resource protection when we're thinking about how are we going to house the amount of people that we need to house to provide equitable housing for everyone. Next slide, please. So to provide a little more drilling down a little bit in terms of literally how do we house in our chapter and in Sonoma County, sort of more specifically, there's sort of 4 types of housing that are predominant. It's dominated by your typical single family dwelling, suburban tract home development, which is not, as I think we can all agree, a long-term solution to the housing problem. There are various urban centers throughout the county and throughout the chapter. Urban is a little bit of a misnomer. They're more on the suburban development. They're essentially small agrarian or farm towns that have since evolved into suburbs. So there's sort of, my phrase is they're suburbs with no urb. But wonderful opportunities exist within these towns, and our 2 speakers we'll take sort of case studies from 2 different places in the county and show what they're doing in this model. And then there's sort of the rural landscape that exists and ranches and farmsteads with housing attached that have existed for a long time. And then there's a 4th model, which is a small sliver, which is the wine country retreat, which has seen a noticeable uptick since the beginning of the pandemic as people look to leave cities and try to find their little piece of rural paradise. Next slide. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our speakers for today, Warren Hedgepeth of Hedgepeth Architects and Mary Dooley of MAD Architecture. Warren is practicing in the city of Santa Rosa with a focus on housing, resource preservation, and general pursuit of beauty and dignity in housing. And Mary, I could say that the exact same thing with her practice focusing on a smaller community of Petaluma, which is sort of in between Santa Rosa and San Francisco in Sonoma County. Both wonderful people, wonderful architects, and both have great visions for how we can handle some of the housing issues that we're confronted with today in California.
Yes, thank you, Danny. With all that in mind, it is both challenging but exciting to think about our times. We just lost another sector of housing up in the Clear Lake area recently, and the reason I'm focusing on Santa Rosa here, we've had kind of a county-wide sweep, is it is the county seat. It is the place where the homelessness is the greatest, because county courthouses and that array generate a lot of various programs. And so the city has had this challenge. It may seem like 2% is a small portion, but it's had an amazing effect. If we can go to the next slide. The focus here, the cultural shift is changing the way we house and plan infrastructure. And I know that the whole topic here with the AIA is who we house as much as how we house. Sometimes as architects, we think about how we think of technology in many ways, but I want to talk about trends that are very, very keen, very real, and very historic. So we have a whole generation rising. We've got the gig generation. We've got an arena of younger people coming into the marketplace. And the 10-year shift has been huge. Santa Rosa has now taken place in the upper 12% of ethnical diversity in the whole country. 57% of a chance of you being able to, if you're selected with another party. of being of a different ethnicity. Next slide. One of the interesting things is we're given this kind of a keen perception about the pleasantries of moving and someday the dream of having a home. This is a rather crafty advertisement from Xfinity, a shiny new car, a happy couple moving a box. But what's really going on here? Do they have a full pay? Do they work a 32-hour week? Where can they afford? Most generations in the Generation Z and millennials aren't interested in car ownership. They're interested in renting versus buying because of a lot of the traumas out there. And it comes down to finances, where they can live fits their income. And if a car can't be supported financially, they typically move to a place where cars are not relied on. Next. To this dream they have, our firm has for several decades been involved in different types of density. When Danny had mentioned that we have a lot of ownership housing, but there are struggles and troubles with its density. The issue here is that we've been looking at models where we can take larger pieces of land instead of singular ADUs. This was actually a 12-lot subdivision. We doubled to 24 doorbells by having the project have a shared ADU within it. It creates a sense of community that is unlike a subdivision. And the whole HSW thought about wellness. In fact, this was the town of Windsor. The director, the manager there used to be a planning director in Santa Rosa. And I asked him a question one day about 4 years ago. I said, you know, Ken, what do you really want in Windsor? What would you like to see happen there? Oh gosh, Warren, we just need ADUs. What would you think of some new prototypes? And this plan, Windsor Gardens, it was just purchased by a builder. It's going to be moving forward. It was granted a whole new place in their zoning ordinance. They hadn't seen zero lot, and they didn't know what it was. But just live questions to planners and need can spark whole new zoning arrays and opportunity. Thank you. One of the big challenges, I'm going to talk about resources in a serious way. I wish that this is really not a laughing matter, but we know that we're hit year after year with fires, and it's no rocket scientist that needs to tell you that rural areas are expensive to build in. They require more roads, more cost. And as wonderfully techy as we are with a lot of different systems, we've had fires that get up to 2,500 degrees. That's within about 10 to 12 minutes. And hardening houses like that is near impossible. Insurance companies are really rethinking this. So creating communities that can defend wildfires turns the conversation of civilization. It's not how we build, but where we build. So this focus is where. Next. So the Press Democrat, which is Pulitzer Prize winning, awarded that from the fires, is very actively concerned with resources. We've had our 5th year of drought. There is competing users of that drought. There's money pouring in from both cannabis and corporate winery to help invest more. And yet we've got 80% consumption of water in the county from that. So the sad thing is that residents already here, there are tax base issues coming up. All cities are looking at more fees to support firefighting on tax rolls. What's that trend going to mean for how many people can stay here? Should the feds be taking that over? So the focus here is by strengthening urban areas within the city, the resource burden on rural parts of town becomes less of a driver. And we do have a water table issue, particularly in Santa Rosa and that corridor with our lake Sonoma, where we can sustain housing. Next. So this is a case study, and you heard about how things are being funded, what's really going on. Our firm had been involved for many years with nonprofits. And when the fires hit, a lot of money came in. You remember that the number, there was $500 million coming in, looking at post-fire elements. And so this is a site, if you see the little yellow there, that is close to a 700 car parking lot of all kinds of services, Costco and so forth. Well-meaning, the state of California came in and decided to fund this. $25 million out of a $65 million project were granted. That's not a loan, that was inborn. You have 2 or 3 projects like this that will rival the sales tax of Auto Row. And as presenting leadership to move this project forward, we had the cooperation of the city. It was wonderful. The planning department has won awards here, but they want to be in the seat for that. Dignity, that was mentioned. Thank you for that. This trailer is someone who's hurting, who wants to not be on wheels. Next. So this is a view of this. This is under construction now. I'm just going to give you a thought here. There are several projects in the state that use these 4%, 9% tax credits. They bolster working class families. This project will have very low, moderate income parties living there. You can see from it, it's not meant to be, I'll use the word introverted, humble, or otherwise oppressive. That's a 2-story community, cardio and social facility. And this is type 3. So it's moving. As you look at 5 stories and beyond, it's a whole nother way to help engage a city with codes, and the team doing this and the city together worked arduously to make sure that this could happen within a very limited period. California says you don't perform in a certain period of time, the money flies away. Next. So this is the concrete being pumped here. So give a handshake to the city, the state for that. There's a question here, and this comes to resources. Transportation infrastructure is on a collision course with low density housing. For those who don't have a copy of Donald Shoup's book, it is a lightning rod for understanding if you practice in California. The high density tax credits are here to help families in need. What comes with that is you do a 5-story project, they want to see working families have vehicular transportation. So 151 units on 3 acres here spawns 218 stalls. That's a lot of stalls. Next. This is a contrast. And again, we have other projects beside that. Kiwanis we're working on their infill that we love. And again, with HSW tax credits, the 55-year clause on holds is what gainstays. It's what secures that vital housing need. So this is a project that's, let's go to the next slide. It's downtown in an infill site, not far from City Hall. In a far distance, you can see the City Hall area is to the upper part. But inserted into the structure on a lot that's only 7,000 feet. Now think of California building from 1960 to 1987. That's all we built. Think of 18 units on a typical lot. Paul Gilder here in the office worked heavily with a Hugh Futrell. We're creating 18 units. They are 1-bedroom, 2-story, but this speaks to a lot of issues. If those of you not aware of walk score, about 40%, Portland's about 80%, but walk score is your general connectivity. This is actually a prototype that could, if you consider transportation and policies of what transportation may be on an alternate level, next, could happen. This is a project even closer yet to downtown. This was a small infill. This is a fighting weight podium. In fact, and thank you, we'll go to the next slide here. This was a joint effort. Our firm got together. We want to thank TLCD for the architect of record and the construction of this. You can see the views to the downtown. An early sketch of mine as we were designing this. It does have a modest commercial component at the front, parking, but this type of wood frame construction is what's real. It's what's being built right now. There are other proposals. Next. So now I want to get to the core of my message to you, and that is that for 40 years, we've had various competing efforts. We've had a downtown commerce that's wanted to keep commerce there. We shoved the freeway years away away from the downtown. So as a result of that, bus ridership in Santa Rosa is 4%. That's pre-COVID, friends. Madison, Wisconsin, where my son just moved to be a planning actually employee. He's working with a whole staff now about the next 4 years. They're 42%. I was a little high over the 700, but I put about 840 for median home price, at least in Santa Rosa. Madison, Wisconsin's 330. Incomes are similar. From the comparison here, we can see how the percentage of bus ridership directly correlates to lower housing prices, the average incomes. Madison produces the highest rate of PhDs in the country, and it has huge funds coming into it because they educate. That education feeds into the economy. So here's innovation, and I heard the mayor from Madison. She was selected for climate crisis to talk about her city. She doesn't want loans. She wants direct money from the feds. And she is hitting it on all cylinders with this. So the innovation and engagement, which we as architects are alive with, do we not wake up every morning with that on our minds? If we don't have that on our minds, we're going to have decline. Architects are born to avoid decline. Next. Okay. This is a study of good intentions. This is actually a piece of city land in Santa Rosa. There's 9 sites available. This is a study our office conducted for a potential developer. As dazzling as that may look, you can see how it's car-centric. Its podium doesn't work with a pro forma of rents. And between comparing that, as compelling as it is, I'm glad it was never built because it's not necessarily building community. It may have a raised community above, but the delicate issue of a sense of belonging, a sense of being part of something. Contrast to the right, this is Portland, Oregon. This is a CLT building. And it has, if you look very carefully at this, in the front of it, those long lines, that's a rail line. Portland has thought since Ivancy from 1973, they got grants federally. Their transportation rails only cost $110,000 per block to extend rails. That transit line feeds this building. The parking you see in front of it, no podium, just a few surface, and it's on its way. Could Santa Rosa be anything like this? Next. So in another vein, looking at infill, a beautiful thing Santa Rosa did was it created in a use permit arena the ability for retail and residential, I'll say impoverished land that had commercial uses to go into at least 30 to the acre. These projects actually aren't funded by TCAC and percentage, but what's fascinating here, on the left, this is an old convalescent hospital that had been there since the 60s, depreciated out. Our firm works on looking at projects, sites, and inviting people that have come to us or that we search after. If any of you are from Woodstock, I was actually, believe it or not, kind of 18, I think, during Woodstock, but there's one of the band members has decided to create a fund to build housing. So instead of investing in Jeff Bezos, he's investing in sites where people can be housed. He underwrites them. So the document to the north there, that's a community common with a cluster that's 3-story. So this is about 64 units on 2.7 acres. To the right there, that was an industrial warehouse site next to a parcel that was historic region. There was a fight there because none of the people that lived in the historic McDonald neighborhood wanted that built, but the mayor of Santa Rosa saved it from mortality. Next. So in summary, in my final slide here, this is a watercolor I did while I was in Siena. When I did this, it was about 10 years ago. I've done work in communist China. I was able to do master planning work in Shanghai, Hanoi Island, across from the Vietnam, and up in northern area next to Northern Korea. When I got back from this trip in studying China, high density areas, I thought I was living in a cornfield. I could walk through any town in Sonoma County and say, Warren, this is like crop growing. You have to go to places like Shanghai and live there to see what we have. But thinking with dignity about community, and in closing here, and thinking about the Plaza del Campo, this is a space that's used because it has housing. That watercolor would be pretty boring without the buildings, right? And boring without the people. Without either of those, neither exist. So I'm asking for a shift. I'm asking fundamentally for accountability. It's not about, in my book, in my years of practice, it's not about policies. Policies have to be accountable. They have to be carried out. So when you're in the lane of doing projects, be mindful of dignity, of humanizing, of making a place gracious. That's your guideline. But also you have to be one that is out of a comfort zone, airlifted in and helpful so that you can live there long-term and not be embarrassed. Thank you.
Thank you, Danny, for the introduction, and thank you, Warren, for setting the stage on the demographics of our region and pointing out the imbalances and suggesting how to find solutions. That was just really cool stuff and great information, ponderances. I also really enjoyed Orange County's How We House presentation and learning about that design context. Where I live and work is different, but relevant to 50 other cities in California around the same size. Petaluma is a medium-sized town in Northern California with a population of 58,000. Next. One back. Many of these medium-sized towns tend to bleed together without distinction or natural separation. Petaluma is defined by a central creek, river, slough, a mountain to the east and hills to the west, and is surrounded by a green belt of wetlands, pastures, and farmland. Next. Warren recently reminded me that Petaluma was the first city in the US to establish an urban growth boundary. And I'm so thankful to the leaders' foresight, because look what they put a limit on. That's our east boundary. And actually there's a running path all along the edge that's quite open. Petaluma is north of San Francisco by about 30 minutes. It's 20 minutes from the third largest national seashore. It's part of Sonoma County's wine country, and in a 15-minute walk from downtown, you can be at the edge of cow pastures and chicken farms. Next. A tidal slough runs through the center of town, where kayaks and rowing teams and outrigger canoes recreate, and yachts come up the river to dock in town for an overnighter. It's a really cool place to live and work and raise a family. The downtown was built around Main Street with the river behind it, used for transport in the 1850s. And the 1940s East Side was designed in suburban patterns with a nod to the watershed. There's some open space pathways, but it is sprawl. It's got an old town core on one side, a highway, one side of the highway, and a bedroom community on the other side. So it's a pretty familiar pattern. Next. Oh, and that was, previous slide was the upper reach of the Petaluma River, which is sliced by a rail line. Now we also have a, oh, can you go one more, please? In town, we have a specific plan that focused on the central area of Petaluma. There's a new old train station near downtown, and it's next to a big brown field, which is a parcel really ripe for new development. And in our town, the highest densities allowed are 60 units per acre, 5 and 6 stories. So we developed or adopted a smart code, which was the first smart code adopted for a historic town. Smart codes were originally for new towns. And all of this was to incentivize development. And the SMART code and the specific plan were adopted in 2003, but it's taken 16 years to really see the first mixed use projects under construction. Next. Our unique historic downtown is on either side of a tidal slough, which rises and falls 9 feet. And if there's a rainstorm, the watershed from Sonoma Mountain fills the creeks upstream. And at high tide, there can be flooding of roadways and lower areas around the river. So currently the downtown is not threatened, but we're anticipating sea level rise and starting to look at specific responses to the heart of town. Petaluma has many big challenges ahead, and hopefully what I'm sharing you can relate to in your own communities. I'll weave a little more about what we're facing along with some projects that address some of the current needs. Our local housing crisis is not uncommon. Half of Petaluma is a commuter town, and many who work here can't afford to live here. The rental market's in high demand, and right now there's only 29 two-bedroom units, apartments available, with a price range of $2,600 to $4,400 a month. Sonoma County AMI is 72,000. 80% of the AMI is 57,000. So that's 43 to 55% of income going to rent at the lowest end, which is the 2,600 for a 2-bedroom. So it's tough. What's the best housing solution for our time? We need to provide many options in response to a spectrum of housing needs. Promote infill, carbon neutrality, and affordability. So I guess my message would be fall in love with where you live, get involved with rezoning, work with your planners and community, and push for equitable, environmental, healthy places to live and work. Next. That's us. Our work speaks to place as well as the broader environmental context. And our 3 F words are friendly, fun, and forthright. For our affordability approach, we're looking at simple and small. And that's our attempt. How we house is a broad topic, and I picked some projects that I thought might be relatable as well as informative in the context of a 60,000 person city with a lot of outdated zoning. So we have 3 downtown infill projects that are in different phases of design approval. Next. About half of Petaluma's downtown zoning is 30 units per acre, with only a 30-foot height, that maximum height. So parking zoning is also pretty archaic with 1 car per bedroom, and or a minimum of 1.5 cars per unit. So you know, we work the system. The first project is getting ready here for design review. Is 3 units on the corner of Main Street facing a narrow residential street. On the ground floor, there's 500 square feet of flex space, allowing a home business, and above is a 2-bedroom, 2-bath in 1,100 square feet with a roof deck. Next. Solar panels, small roof deck, small backyard. Next. This is a thin slice, 3-unit live work going into construction documents phase. It's on a really underutilized alley, also in standard zoning with height limits, and each unit's 20 by 60 with a 2-bedroom, 2-bath above, and the workspace behind the garage. Also roof decks, 0 lot lines. Next. Another view. Next. And then this is a fully permitted 10-unit mixed use project with the upper units are 2-bedroom, 2-bath, 1,200 square feet. And the lower units are 900 square feet, 1 bedroom. And all three of these infill projects I just showed are on open lots right in the middle of downtown and mixed use zoning. Kind of reminded me of Warren's cornfield analogy. Next. Next. But what about doubling the housing stock with the low hanging fruit? Daniel Gaiman in the talk last month said the most attainable housing are backyards. Agreed. With 15,000 homes in ownership, it's possible to gain at least hundreds of new dwellings. And also the HCD has an excellent page on ADUs with free plans up and down the West Coast. If you haven't visited that page, it's really informative. Petaluma is working on a hybrid permit-ready ADU program. Its program is to commission an architect team to design and pre-permit flexible plans available and free to the public. So the ask is that the team comes up with a design that has 3 sizes and addresses both traditional and contemporary architecture. While fraught with unanswered questions, we put our hat in the ring for the ADU program in our fair city. Imagining the most successful vision, we picture little mad ADUs popping up in backyards differentiated enough to be fitting housing for many who want to live here. And in time, and ideally, this encourages improved transit and other modes of travel through town. Next. Some of the ADUs that we've been working on that will bring this vocabulary forward if fingers crossed we are selected. Next. Another ADU. This is a studio. Thank you. I wanted to move on to a unique solution that we were involved in called Keller Court Commons. It's a pocket neighborhood development surrounded by historic homes close to downtown. Next. The pocket neighborhood was inspired by the bungalow courts concept in Southern California, and the developer had successfully built a few of these projects in Washington state. The defining feature of the site planning was a car-free zone. Cars are parked outside the enclave of single family homes, which surround a green and a commons building. The planning approach provided an alternative, fostering community with porches oriented centrally. Everyone walks to their front door. For Keller Court Commons, the target market was empty nesters, downsizers, retirees looking to live in a smaller, safe community, 2-bedroom, 2+ baths with let's see, 1,500 square foot homes. The design amenities and pedestrian friendly locations suggested that these homes would sell like hotcakes, but the concept was unfamiliar to buyers sold on the old American dream. So Keller Court Commons was a shift in single family dwelling thinking. It's not co-housing, it's not an intentional community, but a physical community by design. The target market was smaller than we had anticipated, but eventually all the homes sold and a new community is born. Next. Next, thank you. The last project I'll share is the interim housing solution. Next. We're well into fire season in Northern California, and my sensitivities are heightened with 2 sons in college zones that are smoke-filled, and my beloved Tahoe forests are among the wreckage. Petaluma, though less threatened by wildfires, has been engulfed in terrible smoke over the last 5 years. And because of its green belt and its terrain, Petaluma has become a refuge for fire victims and evacuees. And some of the homes lost in the fires will not be rebuilt. People are permanently displaced. And it was surprising to me to find out that 10% of Sonoma County's current homeless population lost their homes in the recent fires. You could go back one slide to the tents. Thank you. In the county, Sonoma County, there are 2,700 homeless people. 300 are in Petaluma and live along the river frontages, the pristine open spaces that have no protection from raw sewage and encampment detritus, nor access to roadways for safety. Through grant funding, the city of Petaluma is undertaking their first interim housing project. We're working with the Committee on the Shelterless and the housing manager to locate 25 sleeping units. It can't be tents packed tightly like the image on the left, and it can't be in a forgotten brownfield. Next. Next. These units are insulated, have heaters and lockable doors, and can make positive shifts for people in dangerous living situations. With our numbers, the first phase interim housing project could address the majority of unsheltered who are seeking transition to permanent housing. It's a pilot program and the units are relocatable with a lifespan of 30 years. And looking at these quick build shelters to be repurposed or expanded as a solution to emergency housing for homeless or fire victims, or come what may. That's part of our new normal. Next. Our task is fully vetting the pre-designed shelters plus thoughtful site planning. Think of an exploded house diagram or a space program document: bathrooms, showers, waste, electrical, drainage, dog runs, smoking areas, eating tents, outdoor areas, storage, trash, personal vehicles, and livability with dignity and safety. Nothing under one roof. It's like a KOA layout, but for a clientele that has very strong feelings about being sheltered or in community at all. For example, the homeless population has expressed a strong safety concern about COVID-19 and safe distancing. The entire area for the interim housing project needs to be fenced to protect the residents without feeling like being kept in. In closing, people deserve shelter and good design across the spectrum of housing needs. Next. Please enjoy the next 3 photos of Petaluma by my friend Scott Hess. What's the best housing, one back, what's the best housing solution for our time? Infill solutions like Warren showed, remodels, yes, ADUs, homeless housing, smart fire rebuilds, worker housing, family compounds, and even stewardship projects. Let's make them beautiful, adaptable, carbon neutral, powered with alternative energy and toxin free, preserving natural open spaces and planting more trees. It's right for us to hold the vision and that urban growth boundary, to gain awareness, to set intentions, and keep practicing. Thank you for listening.
Well, wonderful job, Mary and Warren. Thank you so much. We have time for questions. Is it okay with you guys to take a few? Excellent. Well, it looks like we've got one question. What do the speakers think about the 3-bedroom units, and is there a demand for 3-bedroom units?
Let me say something. It's interesting that if we're talking about affordability, I was just at a meeting this morning. The stats came out that 50% of all construction in Sonoma County is done by Latinos, as well as about 38% of all food and accommodations. The retail is about 37%. The family model typically is that these wonderful people have a need for housing in families. And we as a company we've been doing quite a bit of 3 bedrooms. In fact, the state is funding. If you're interested in doing tax credit projects, we have a project called Boyd Street. It's over in Sebastopol Road in a more, I'll say the term post-industrial area. But there again, the point scoring to get awarded revenue is heavily looking at 3 bedrooms. It's not just a dither now. It's a bigger number. And you can contrast that against market rate. The more expensive it is to build somewhere, it's just going to be shut out. My whole conversation about, do we chase the car and park the car with new technical systems, podiums? Those projects typically are thin on 3 bedroom because the cost and the carry is so egregious that the idea of 1 bedroom or 2 bedroom parties is the situation.
And I'll just add that all our projects that I showed, the ones that are in design and the built Keller Court Commons, are all 2+ bedrooms. So officially 2 bedrooms, but there's usually, and there's all of them have either an alcove, an office, which is technically a bedroom, but say no more. That's really what is in demand.
Another question here that says, this is specifically relating to Keller Commons, I think. I'm surprised that the units in Petaluma were not immediate sellers. What were the prices per unit and what was the date of the sales?
They were expensive. They were about $1 million. So these are not affordable homes. This is really about a project type that was being tested in this town. And but on the other hand, the sales were slow because this was all pre-pandemic. And I think they probably would have sold very quickly with the sort of urban flight from San Francisco that we saw, as properties were getting bought up by people with means. Of course, that led to very good negotiable prices for rentals in San Francisco. So I'm trying to see this as the circle of life, but that was the reason why they didn't go quickly. I think people also, the old American dream, I want to just to be clear about that, is there's still some vision of the picket fence and the garage that you drive into, and obviously that's still a pattern that's happening across the nation. This was different.